Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. It has been a few weeks since we were last together, and I do appreciate your patience in bearing with me. We did have some health issues within the family, and so was taking some time to be with the family over the last few weeks, but everything is headed in the right direction, and so very grateful for that, but excited to be back here with all of you. And before we get started, I want to let you know about a few of the job opportunities that we're currently searching for. We have several things in Dallas, a briefing attorney with a high-profile plaintiff's firm, also construction litigation, a trial boutique, and then also a real estate and corporate securities position. In San Antonio, a more senior commercial litigation position, as well as commercial bankruptcy and just general commercial litigation. We've got in Waco, here where I am, insurance defense position, as well as an IP and commercial litigation position. That position could be potentially located in that firm's Dallas office or even remote, but the focus of that work is here in Waco. In Houston, also looking there for a civil litigation attorney. In Fort Worth, we've got a commercial bankruptcy and litigation position. And then in Austin, a family law position. So a lot going on all around the state. And the last thing I'll mention in terms of just announcements is that I do plan to have for you later this week. So check back in your feed this week, probably Thursday, a new movie verdicts episode that we recorded a couple of weeks ago, and excited to get that one out to you. That one is Aaron Brockovich, and we have a special guest joining us for that, joining Robert Callahan and myself for that episode. So tune back in later this week. We'll have that one ready for you to go as well. All right, today we are in Houston, where our guest is Spencer Edwards. Spencer is a shareholder and trial lawyer with the Hudgins Law Firm, where he focuses on defending clients in wrongful death and catastrophic injury claims. Spencer is board certified in personal injury trial law and is rated a preeminent 5.0 by Martindale Peer Review. He was also selected as a Texas Super Lawyer 5 years in a row. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Spencer Edwards on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, Spencer Edwards joins us right now. Spencer, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, let's start off by hearing a little bit about your practice and your firm, and we'll go from there. So start by just telling us a little about what you do.
Sure. So I'm a 97 graduate from Baylor. So I've been practicing 25 years this year, and I'm primarily a catastrophic injury, wrongful death, personal injury trial lawyer. That's what I do. I'm board certified. Haven't tried a case since the fall of 19 due to COVID-19, but normally I'm a trial lawyer. So, for the last couple of years, I've been a Zoom lawyer like most of us.
Absolutely. So, do they hand out like, a gold plate or something for 25 years? What do you get for that? Is there something that,
not that I've been told. I mean, it's for me. It's very easy for me to remember because I happen to graduate from law school on my 25th birthday, and so on my 50th birthday, that'll be the 25th anniversary when I graduated from law school. So
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on that. That's an achievement just in that. So that's awesome. You mentioned that you the last couple of years have been bare when it comes to trials. How has that though impacted the actual cases themselves? Do you find that those cases that have come through have just been completely on hold? Have some been able to settle, or just the delays kind of just delay everything? What does that look like? Or maybe it's kind of depends on the situation, obviously. I don't know, but talk a little bit about that.
yeah, I mean, obviously it's case by case, but I mean, from 30,000 feet when COVID started in, March of 2020, it's been 2 years. When COVID first started, most lawyers, including myself, put everything on hold for several months.
Yeah.
Most lawyers were very, very reluctant to, venture into the Zoom world and all that kind of good stuff. But I mean, by the summer, I think everybody kind of realized that we were in this for the long or medium haul. And so that's really when, depositions started resuming. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, some cases settled, but more than anything else, I've got a backlog of 2 years of cases,
Yeah.
and I have a backlog of trial settings that is just absolutely dizzying. On top of new files that have come in the last 2 years, so
Yeah.
and I'm not alone. Every other lawyer I've talked to is the same way, because
Yeah.
you have cases that we're going to go to trial, and then they get pushed back, and now everything gets pushed back, and now it's all coming up at once. So it's very backlogged.
Yeah. And just for context, I know a lot of people listen to this later than when we're talking today, but it's February 17th as we're having this conversation. And with this COVID stuff, we always know that things change quickly and these waves come and go, and Supreme Court orders come and go, and everything else, Texas Supreme Court, I mean. And so who knows? And right now, do you have indications of when the earliest possible trial settings that you've got scheduled at this point? You obviously kind of holding that loosely in terms of.
Yeah, no. And you bring up a really good point. I mean, I have a case that's set for trial March 1st in Dallas County.
Okay. Yeah.
And Dallas County had shut down jury trials completely due to the Omicron variant.
Yep.
And then as of February 14th, which is 3 or 4 days ago, they allegedly resumed jury trials.
Okay.
So, who knows? So, where are we in a week or 2 weeks? I mean, I've stopped trying to guess or predict, because I mean, it's just been, it's been 2 years of insanity. So.
Right. And then as the lawyer, and especially as the Baylor lawyer, right? Like, you always have to be ready to go to trial, whatever that trial date is, right? You got to be ready to go, as I know you are. So what about just separate from COVID, in the catastrophic personal injury world? Is there anything new that's been going on from a policy standpoint, a legislative standpoint, that impacts that particular practice area to be aware of, or things going on there?
Well, I think a couple things have happened. One is more of a longer term thing. Over the past, I would say, 12 years, there's been a tremendous shift in who is on the bench. And it's been a tremendous shift from Republican to Democrat, which shouldn't matter, but does.
Right.
And at least here in Harris County, we've had a tremendous shift of, at first it was just a shift from Republican to Democrat. And that resulted in quite a few plaintiffs' attorneys, plaintiff personal injury lawyers ended up on the bench. For the most part, it was kind of a breath of fresh air, because you had lawyers who are now on the bench who've actually tried cases,
right,
and they've actually tried personal injury cases, so they actually know what the lawyer is dealing with on a day in, week in, month out basis.
Right.
Now it's gotten to a point in some counties where there is no rhyme or reason as to why people get voted on or off the bench. And so there's not a lot of consistency from judge to judge as to experience and knowledge, and so on and so forth. And so there are several judges throughout the state that are probably less qualified to be judges than a brand new Baylor lawyer.
Yeah.
Just because they don't have even a basic understanding of the rules of evidence procedure. There's one judge in Harris County who this judge's first trial was this judge's first trial as a lawyer was the first trial she presided
as a judge. Yeah.
I mean, and that can be challenging. And then on the flip side, and then another thing that's happened in the personal injury context is there have been more than a handful of very high dollar verdicts that have come out. And so, that's kind of changed the landscape a little bit. I mean, within the past year or so, there was I think he passed away. I don't remember if he passed away or if it was just a personal injury claim, but a guy suffered severe burns, and plaintiff's attorney's got a $200+ million verdict. There was an alleged sexual assault here in Harris County, and jury awarded $44 million against the hotel where it took place, as well as the person who attacked her. But they put 90% on the hotel, 90% enforcement in the hotel. Another case in Harris County, a gentleman was injured in an accident. I don't know the full details, but injured in an accident working at Bush Airport and suffered pretty severe injuries. I think he's paralyzed, chest down. He got $350 million verdict. So there have been some incredibly high verdicts, and that has injected some uncertainty into the evaluation of cases and stuff like that. So it's injected some uncertainty in the defense side, and it's emboldened some plaintiffs' attorneys who probably shouldn't be emboldened. So
yeah. So you kind of have the double whammy of the more democratic, typically plaintiff-leaning judges, and plus those that maybe aren't beyond that, not able to or aren't quite as experienced as their predecessors potentially on the bench, combined with the high verdicts that the juries are willing to dole out at this point.
Right.
That makes it a little bit of a challenge, I would say. That's interesting. Okay, well, what about as you look back over your first few years of practice? What's maybe something that stands out as something that you learned in those days that was an important lesson that you learned or piece of advice that you received that is still part of how you practice today?
I think one of the biggest lessons I learned was to remember that you're going to work with or against lawyers and judges again. And so, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. And just chill a little bit.
Right.
There's no need to be super aggressive, and just remember how you behave with certain lawyers, because you only have one reputation, and so and you can it takes time to build up a reputation, but it also takes a couple of bad moments to kind of mess up your reputation. So just be professional, and the way I've always put it is I don't mind lawyers that throw inside, but don't throw a beanball. And so I'm a big baseball fan.
Yeah, I like that.
And I'll be the first one to brush somebody off the plate, but I'm not gonna throw a beanball. And that being said, if another attorney behaves that way, you've got to be willing to come back. You've got to be able to just let her rip, and because if that happens, especially in a trial setting, especially in front of a jury, especially in front of a judge who's maybe not in your favor, if the plaintiff's attorney's out of line, you got to come off the top rope. And if it's a situation where the rules of evidence and procedure aren't going to apply, then they don't apply. And so, don't be the lawyer who is behaving under the rules when the rules aren't being enforced. Because if the other side is not going to play by the rules, then the rules don't matter. And you just gotta kind of go from there. So kind of a long-winded answer,
No.
but it's one of those things where I guess as a baby lawyer, I was always like, rah, but then I think it's more effective just to be professional, and just do your job and be polite. But then if the other lawyer gets out of line, you got to be willing to, get out of line as well. So
yeah. Well, and that kind of, I think, harkens back to what you were talking about before with the judges, because particularly if judges are inexperienced or with the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure, and maybe are allowing the other lawyer to walk them down a road that's incorrect or whatever, then you got to be ready to adapt to that and play to that, right? And not just, I mean, that's certainly could happen in those situations, it seems like.
Yeah, and the best way to do it is to do it with a big smile on your face.
Yeah.
And don't lose your cool. Don't be calm, and then, just because if you have a judge who's going against you and is going to keep going against you, if you call the judge out, if you embarrass the judge or anything like that, they're just going to keep going against you.
Yeah.
But if instead you just roll with it and be nice, and then after a while start making jokes like, what a shock, you're going with him again, wow, I can't believe you're overruling me again. At some point they're gonna let up just a little bit.
You're gonna get the makeup call on the makeup call on the next half inning.
No, absolutely, 100%. But I've always practiced from the standpoint of and I don't know why, because one thing that's really, how do I put this? When you come out of Baylor practice court, you're taught that the rules of evidence apply, the rules of procedure apply, and the judge is going to follow the rules and the lawyer is going to follow the rules. And so as a young lawyer, I remember I was like a first-year attorney and I was a plaintiff's attorney, and the judge set aside a no answer default judgment. That's always going to happen. It always, there's no way on earth that a judge is going to deny a motion to set aside a default that's filed 2 weeks after the judgment's entered. Well, in my Baylor lawyer brain, I come in saying they haven't checked the boxes, and the judge overturned the default judgment, and I'm just sort of like flabbergasted. And I was like, Judge, I got to ask, why? What is going on here? And the judge is like, send me interrogatories. And I was like, and he was being sarcastic, but I was completely blown away.
Yeah.
And so, so I learned very, very quickly that the rules of evidence, the rules of procedure, they're not always followed. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be ready for that. And so if you're going into a case, when you look at your motion to exclude, I don't want these 10 things coming in, you got to prepare as though they're coming in.
Right.
And you can't freak out if they do. You know what I mean? Because one thing that I've learned is that, the rules of evidence were not created in a vacuum. The rules of evidence came out of common law courts where there would be, a person versus another person in a lawsuit, and they would just talk about whatever the heck they wanted to. Well, then whoever's in charge is like, wait a minute, hold on. This is a car wreck. We're not going to talk about things that don't have anything to do with the car wreck. So we're going to come up with a rule, and evidence has to be relevant. And then the rules got built from there. Well, the reality is, if something comes in that's not relevant, you can still talk about how it's not relevant, and so that's what I do as a defense lawyer. I mean, if something comes in that's not relevant, then I point the finger at the plaintiff's attorney. I was like, plaintiff's attorney knows that doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Right.
And the only reason they're talking about it is because they can't win on things that really talk about the case. So,
yeah,
you just kind of go from there.
So what about more recently? Is there anything that you discovered or learned more recently that you maybe wish someone had pulled you aside as a younger lawyer and told you when you were getting started?
I guess the main thing is just to keep perspective on it.
Yeah.
A good trial lawyer, you're going to lose. You're going to lose, and you're going to lose cases that you should win. And you might win cases you should lose. And, losing is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I lost a trial, God, it's been 14, 15 years ago, and I was devastated. I mean, I was absolutely devastated. With hindsight, looking at the case, I probably should have lost, but I mean, I don't think you can, I don't think a good lawyer, it's one thing to be objective when you're evaluating the case to figure out your weak points so you can try a good case. But I mean, if you don't think you're going to win when you step foot in the courtroom, you're done. You have to walk in there. You have to exude confidence. And so,
yeah,
whether you've sold yourself in a bill of goods or whether you're a true believer in the case, I mean, losing sucks.
Yeah,
I mean, it really, really, really sucks to get a verdict, to get a jury verdict that you don't like. So just know that it's going to happen, and the sun's still going to come up the next day, and the people in your life who love you before are going to love you after. They don't really care.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so just keep it in perspective.
No, that's really good. And I think always a good lesson to keep in mind for sure. What's something that you have noticed or observed about young lawyers that you've worked with or that have worked for you over the years that stands out in a positive way, that makes a good impression on you, lets you know that they're on the right track? What are maybe one or two things that young lawyers can do to stand out?
Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And, pride is one of the most dangerous. I think pride is probably the most dangerous characteristic a lawyer can have. If you think you have the answer, then that's great. But if somebody else has a different approach to it, there's a balance. You have to have the humility to listen to somebody else's viewpoint, and then the confidence to make the decision is how you should proceed. But I think a good lawyer, especially a young lawyer, is going to listen more than they talk, and listen, and keep asking questions. And if they're working for someone who doesn't like questions, well, that's on the older lawyer, not the young lawyer. It's just that simple. So but ask questions and ask why. I mean, ask why. Because I'm doing this almost 25 years, and so when I'm taking a deposition, I'm doing boom, 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 and some of it's second nature. And I wonder why you're like, why'd you ask that question? Say, oh, okay, because I was trying to get to here, but if I went straight to here, I'd be telegraphing the question. And so instead I wanted to go open-ended, and then go, and because of those open-ended, boom. And if you just go straight to boom, they're not going to agree with you. So ask questions. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And especially, that why component. I think that's really, really helpful. What about on the flip side? What are some things that are concerning that you, if you see them in the young lawyers working in your firm, that you try to head off at the pass or course correct at an early stage when you see it?
Well, the only thing that ever really concerns me is making the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
If a young lawyer, it doesn't have to be young, but if a young lawyer does something and I say, no, you need to do it. Don't do that. Don't do ABC. You need to do DEF.
Right.
And then the next time they take a deposition or the next time they write a motion, they do ABC again. I'm like, what? I was like, I told you not to do it this way. Why are you doing it this way? Yeah. And then if the answer is, well, I didn't understand why you told me that, then I'm like, okay, you need to tell me you don't understand. And then it's all about communication. Because to me, if they don't understand what I'm telling them, then that's it. I think that's on me. I'm not going to just, well, you should have asked the right question. So it's just a lot about communication. But that gives me pause more than anything else.
Yeah.
Is when they do something, and I say wrong. A lot of this stuff is a subjective way of doing things. But if they do something a certain way, I'm like, don't do it that way. Do it this way.
Right.
And then they go do it again the wrong way again. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. Is it that raises a kind of a follow up to that? Is it ever appropriate for the associate to push back on the partner, on the person assigning the work or the reviewing the work? Is there a situation where that makes sense? Not necessarily. And I'm wondering, like, in like a professional, respectful way, not in a disrespectful way, but is there ever a reason why that might make sense, or how would you advise an associate who wants to like question, like, well, yeah, you're saying do it this way, but we could do it this way, and that's just as good, or like, I don't know, like what's this is different from just ignoring what you're saying and doing the wrong thing over and over again. This is, I hear what you're saying, but I want to push back a little bit. How can, if they ever should, how could a associate do that in a way that's okay?
Well, I think the number one thing there is I think it's important to approach it from a why standpoint.
Okay.
And to approach it from a respectful why standpoint.
Yeah.
And just feel like, listen, I understand what you're saying, and you want me to do A, B, and C. I don't really understand why you're telling me to do this way, because when I look at it, I think we should do it a different way.
Yeah.
So why am I wrong? What am I missing? And that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But it depends on the facts and circumstances.
Sure.
Like if something needs to be done right now, for example, if I'm in the middle of a trial or under a deadline, and I'm like, I need a motion to bifurcate in 2 hours. I need this right now. 90 minutes later, if the young lawyer comes to me and is like, excuse me, I've been doing a lot of research and stuff, I'm gonna be like, are you kidding me?
Right.
I was like, I need this done right now. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me the thought process. This needs to be done right now. So,
yeah,
a lot of it just depends on what's going on at the time.
Yeah.
But I think the best way to do it is just to ask why.
Yeah.
No,
I'm really glad you said that, because I do think lawyers need to hear that there may be a time and a place to raise those questions or ask those deeper why questions, but that context around it and that time and the place and what's going on, you got to think about that first. Otherwise it's not going to go well, probably, if it's the wrong time to do that. Exactly. So, what advice do you have for associates in terms of business development and client development? I think a lot of times they get confused. Okay, don't worry about it. Go ahead.
The best way to develop new clients is to do good work.
Okay. Yep.
And the best way to develop business is to become a really good lawyer. So start there, and don't ever overlook an opportunity for business development. But the number one way to develop business as a young lawyer is to be a good lawyer. It's just that simple. Because if you're approaching a possible client or someone like that, and you're a 1-2 year lawyer, it's just the reality of the situation. They're probably not going to hire the baby lawyer.
Right.
It's just that simple. Whether that's right, wrong, fair, or not, it's just the reality of it. Especially if you look like a baby. When I graduated from law school, I was 25. I looked so young. My first trial, some of the ladies on the jury were like, "You remind me of my son and grandson." I'm like, "Hi."
I'm sure the client was thrilled with that.
But if you do well, it actually helps. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But because you're sitting there and they're like, "Oh, I see my son or grandson in you, and I would want my grandson to do well." And then if you start talking and you sound like you know what you're doing, they're like, "Well, damn, he or she looks young, but they kind of know what they're doing." So
yeah,
as far as business development is concerned, I would focus on becoming a really good lawyer. And then watch the way lawyers at the firm develop their business.
Yeah, that's good.
And then beg, borrow, and steal,
Yep.
and just kind of go from there. And, one thing that I've definitely seen that is a huge, I'm not even going to call it a problem. It's just a different world. I think younger people, my son is 22, almost 23. he never talks on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
That generation, they don't talk on the phone.
No.
They text, and stuff like that. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I text people, but when I was in college and law school, I didn't have a cell phone. It didn't exist.
Right.
Email didn't exist when I started practicing law. And so phone calls. And so, I think that is one of the biggest blind spots that younger lawyers have, especially when you're dealing with an older client who's used to being on the phone.
Right.
It serves everyone's best interest to have a good relationship with your client.
Yeah.
And to me, the best way to have that relationship is just to talk to them. Just get on the phone, and be able to talk, and most people who go to law school, they have pretty good game. They just know how to talk to people, and so just be able to talk to somebody, and have a couple of fallback questions like, how's the weather?
Right.
Whatever, and just chat with people. And so to me, I think that's the best way to, develop business.
No, I think we're.
I have clients that I don't even have cases with right now, and we'll text and talk about baseball.
Yeah.
And I have a friend of mine. We've been friends for probably 12 years, and I've had cases with him on and off. During the pandemic, he's a big Mets fan, and so during the pandemic, I'm texting him about the '86 Astros versus Mets, all that kind of stuff, and. He hired me on a case a couple weeks ago, and it's just be a good, friendly person. Be the kind of person that your client would want to hang out with.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, I think we're not too far away, and maybe there are some firms doing this already, or law schools even. I don't know, but I think we're not too far away from having to have some specific training sessions on talking on the telephone. I really do, because of what you just said. Like, I think that, and I'm probably just on I'm about to be 44, and I'm probably just on that kind of crossover from a lot of talking on the phone to a lot of texting and emailing. But yeah, the millennials and those Gen Z and whatever are so heavy on text and email, and you still have a lot of the client base that's 45 and up that are more phone and in-person based. And that's just a disconnect I think would absolutely serve the younger lawyers to just get comfortable with. And I really do, though, think that there's probably going to need to be some training offered for that, because I just don't think it's happening at all. So I'm glad you mentioned it for sure. Okay, so when you all are in the process of hiring an associate, and most of the people listening to this are out practicing, so this wouldn't be out of law school necessarily, but someone that's maybe been practicing for a couple of years, 3 years, and maybe making a move on a lateral basis. What are some things that you're looking at, maybe either on the resume or in a cover letter or in the interview itself, that are the priorities for you that are important that maybe candidates should be aware of?
I'm not a big resume guy. And it's just it's one of those things where I don't really care what's on the resume.
Yeah.
And the way we run it, we have a couple of younger lawyers. They sift through all the resumes, and they determine who they're going to interview, and then they determine who we're going to bring back for callbacks, which is great, because years ago, I would be one of the lawyers who's like going through resumes,
right,
trying to figure out who to interview, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't have it. Trying to look at it is so difficult, and to me, especially coming from Baylor, where unfortunately, I don't think your grades at Baylor reflect your level of intelligence or your level of hardworkingness or your ability to be a lawyer.
Right.
Baylor is such a difficult law school that grades don't really matter that much to me personally, coming out of Baylor.
Sure.
Because I went to Baylor.
Yeah.
And so I know how difficult the grading can be, and how just kind of not unfair, but I just don't. That's not the right word.
Right.
But I don't think someone who gets a C in practice court that tells me nothing.
Yeah.
It tells me nothing. Someone who gets an A, that's pretty impressive.
Right.
But I'm not going to discount someone who doesn't make good grades at Baylor Law School.
Right.
And so
right.
instead, I'm going to be much more impressed with somebody who has a work history. And, I'm not talking about between college and law school, but I mean, someone who, worked in high school, worked in college, stuff like that. That jumps out at me, because, I'd rather have an average student who's willing to work hard than a very, very high grades student who, it just comes natural and they don't have to work as hard.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's, I think, important for people to hear, because I think most lawyers probably don't include, high school or college work experience on their legal resumes. And so therefore, to know that there are lawyers and employers out there that would care about something like that, I think as a candidate, you need to be aware of that and know that that could be a strength for you, and find a way in an interview setting to bring that up, because otherwise, it's not on a resume. So, or maybe it's in a cover letter that you can write that too, but usually it's not gonna be on a resume. So, being able to, skillfully weave that into like the narrative of your biography or your history, or as you're talking in an interview, is going to be important. And you're definitely not the only one that's mentioned that before, Spencer. I mean, like, there are people that really like to see, sometimes it's things like debate in high school, or things like that, or other things that may not, make it onto the resume by the time you're, in 3 or 4 or 5 years of practice. And so I think that's good to remember that, some things may be good interview fodder that you haven't thought about in a while, actually. And so I think that's a good reminder, a reminder of that.
Right.
Okay. We're almost out of time. So before we, I know we've been going here for about 35 minutes. So, before we, wrap up, is there, anything that, I haven't asked you about that you would, want to share with the young lawyers in the audience, or something that we didn't go as deep on that you would want to, spend a little bit more time on?
The only thing is this, literally before, and I don't know if this podcast is geared towards Baylor attorneys or lawyers in general, but when I graduated from law school, I had Muldrow and Powell for practice court, and before them it was Matt Dawson. Everybody talks about Mad Dog Dawson, Matt Dawson, and I was just like, whatever. I have student loans. I just want to get a degree. I don't really care about all the all these things. And so when I was graduating, we had the ability to vote on who we wanted to speak at law school graduation among the graduating class. And so we voted for Nolan Ryan, and the backup was Willie Nelson. So those were our two choices.
Okay. A couple of solid picks.
Believe it or not, and believe it or not, the Baylor University School of Law was not keen on having Willie Nelson speak, and apparently Nolan Ryan was not available.
So I figured.
He was not available, and so at least that's what they told us. My guess is they just rolled their eyes and did what they wanted to do, which is fine. And so Matt Dawson spoke,
right,
and so he came and spoke, and I have a little brother. And so I've been to a lot of commencement addresses for high school, college, and law school, and all that kind of stuff. And most of them are extremely boring, and most of them really don't have too much advice. And so, Matt Dawson got up there and he talked and he talked and he talked, and I was like, "You've got to be joking! This is supposed to be Mad Dog Dawson," and he was just a little long-winded. But what he did say near the end, this could have been his entire commencement address. What he said at the end was, he was like, I'm called Mad Dog. People call me that, and I've always been very successful and all that kind of good stuff. And he's like, don't get me wrong. I'm a pretty smart guy, but that's not why I've been successful. He's like, I have been successful and I always will be successful. It's because I've always worked. And, I've always worked hard, and I made a promise to myself when I got out of law school, when I became a lawyer, that even if I lost, it wasn't going to be because the other side outworked me.
Yeah.
So don't ever be outworked. Don't ever be underprepared, and always work harder than the other side. Just don't stop working. And that kind of took that advice to heart. And it's probably the best advice that somebody could have as a trial lawyer, because it can be extremely stressful, and it is stressful. There's a lot of pressure, and it doesn't matter if you're a plaintiff or defendant, personal injury, or commercial litigation, or criminal law. I mean, no matter what it is, you're representing somebody else's interest,
Sure.
and somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. And like I said, I mean, every trial lawyer loses, and you're going to lose at some point. Just don't be because you were outworked.
Yeah.
Just don't be because you're outworked. Be the lawyer who works hard, and most of the time, working hard will pay off at some point.
Yeah. So. No, that's great. Thank you for that. And I will mention, so we love all of our Baylor lawyers, obviously, but this podcast is definitely for every lawyer in Texas. So all of the UT and Houston and everybody else, Tech, we love you as well. And you'll indulge us for some of our law school, our Baylor Law legacy things that we talk about on here fairly often. So thank you for that. Also, it's funny that you talk about the commencement speaker requests that you made, because I think by the time I got there, I don't know if the students had just been beaten into submission or it was an official policy, but when we were suggesting who could speak, it was limited to the faculty. And so I don't know if that was by policy or because over time, people just kept getting told no, and faculty kept getting put up there at commencement. And so finally it was like, which faculty member are we going to have speak? So I don't think it was on any of our even minds to invite someone outside of the building to speak at commencement. So that's hilarious. A good old, it would have been nice to have that optimism and hope to be able to get Nolan Ryan or Willie Nelson to come speak. So,
well, it's funny you say that, because I don't remember exactly how it happened, other than because I was a summer graduate, and so it just came up during PC2, and if people were like, I just don't remember how it came up. Someone from the career services office or somebody must have come in and just like, hey, who do y'all want to speak? Y'all get to vote on it. And somebody was like, Nolan Ryan. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, Nolan Ryan. And there were a lot of people who were like, and there were some people like, who's Nolan Ryan? And he's my childhood idol. I was like, absolutely, he's a Texas legend.
That's right.
And so there were a lot of people who were like rolling their eyes, and they were like, that's stupid, he's a baseball player. And then people were like, what about Willie? And it's like, yeah, it's Willie Nelson. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, you're gonna have Matt Dawson speak. I'm like, why did you ask us?
That's right.
Why did you even ask?
Yeah.
And as it turned out, he gave an incredibly impactful commencement speech, at least for me.
Yeah, I'm sure the other two would have been great, but it sounds like you got your money's worth out of that one. So, all right, rapid fire questions to finish up our time here. Just one word, one phrase, questions and answers. Let's hop in there. All right, name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate. Eager. I like it.
Eager to learn.
Yeah. What habit has been key to your success?
Get some sleep.
There you go. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Well, those are two very different things. My favorite apps have nothing to do with productivity. So,
let's go. If there's something useful that you use in the office that maybe others could benefit from, let's go with that.
A whiteboard. There you go. Yeah, I've got one as well.
What would you list?
Keep it simple.
Yeah,
keep it simple.
Absolutely. What would you list first in the interest section of your resume?
Probably baseball.
Yeah. We fit baseball a lot today.
Probably baseball. Probably the Astro. I'm wearing a.
You got your.
No, I'm not wearing an Astro.
Oh no, Astros today.
No, right. I usually have an Astro shirt on. I don't have one on today. So.
Last one. Your favorite legal movie?
Oh, My Cousin Vinny.
That's a classic for sure, and a favorite on the show. Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, Spencer, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us. Really, really appreciate it, and wish you and your firm all the best, and hopefully some trials here in 2022. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, my thanks again to Spencer Edwards for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? And if you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you're interested in any of the opportunities that we mentioned at the top of the show, or you just want to visit about what might be out there for you in the market, please get in touch with me and I would be happy to visit with you. Finally, remember to check back later this week as Robert Callahan and I are joined by a special guest, and we dive into Aaron Brockovich on a new movie verdicts episode. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.